Good evening. My name is Kenneth. I chose to take the platform to make a video to talk about this week's studies and to talk about my learning, how I applied equity in the classroom, and I want to answer the prompts that was given in our assignment. I like to start with how do the social identities of culture, ethnicity, and race impact myself, students, and learning. Being that I'm African American, I do feel like African Americans are at a disadvantage in the learning process, being that they don't have the means to prepare them growing up, and other factors affect their learning and um, classroom ability. Starting with being from single parent households. It's hard for a single parent if you have multiple kids to make sure they're all studying, and sometimes it's hard, and that is a barrier that we deal with. I believe having no motivation to want to do better in the classroom. They see their parents struggle and not being successful, and that has a effect on their thinking of what am I supposed to do? Am I supposed to work at McDonald's all my life? So I think that affects them, and that is a problem. Most of my students come from single parent households, and I struggle with the day to day motivation of them doing their work and wanting to do their work so they can be successful. Next question is, what assumptions do we make about people from different races, ethnicities, and cultures? I like to go back and talk about the video that I watched that we had to do this week on the reflection, and I chose the one with Jay Smooth, how I learned to stop worrying and love discussing racism. And he said, naturally, we have this prejudice effect that we don't want to help someone, or we don't want to come in contact with these people because we don't know how to deal with those interactions, and sometimes that has a negative effect on you, that you maybe miss out on your blessings per se because you missed an opportunity to deal with somebody because you had a prejudice that stopped you. He made a valid point about not wanting to be a perfect person, but striving to be a better person in that everyday practice to want to be better. And I thought that was a very valid point in talking about prejudice. But you do make those assumptions, and I can say that you might hear things like, yeah, you're better because you're from here, or you're because you're rich, you're able to get these opportunities. And somewhere I think that just hearing that growing up, that has effect on me. But going back, I always felt that if you want to be better and successful, you have to work at it, and that's what comes at it. Um, Another point he makes in the video was talking about racism was generationally set, like it was designed over centuries and centuries of time, and that's why we have that. So we can't argue that it's there and prevalent, but it's how you deal with it. It's how you deal with it. And even going back to the original assignment, and in the classroom, the kids doing the experiment, that had a effect on them later on in life and how they treated other people. And I thought that was a very good experiment. Going to our next question down. Pose your own answer to Sitchell and Bacon's question, why is there a dichotomy where some students achieve and some students do not? Well, there's a learning gap. There's a learning gap. I do feel that there's a learning gap, and the a point that I said, if you have the resource, the means to provide more resource sources, per se a computer, per se tutoring, per se extra help that's going to help a child learn, then you have a better chance of being successful. And I feel like they're not on all the playing field. Take example of reading. Um, Growing up, I always heard that if you read more, you learn more words and you do better on SAT tests. Well, my mother was a single parent, and she didn't push me to have to come home and read every day, but I knew if I did read, I would learn more words. Well, I did okay on the SAT, but I know if I would have read more, I could have did better. So I do feel that there just you have those opportunities and you can't they can't be fulfilled. Um, and I'm gonna come back to that question because I don't feel like I totally answered it yet. But as I answer more of the questions, it'll come back to me. Why is it important to develop equity in the classroom? That is a very valid point. And what I've taken so far from developing equity in the classroom is it provides a measure to closing the achievement gaps. It's putting everybody on the same playing field. It's providing the support, and I believe that's a valid point. It provides the support to your low track students so that they strive for something bigger. Like our low track students, they're just striving to be low level students. But if they are integrated with the high level students, we're all striving to be better and successful. And big example going with that was the West Orange School District out of chapter 12. I thought that was very important. They started with on page 226 of wanting to close the economically and cultural gaps for their students, and their emphasis was on mathematics. And another point that I made, and I said, if a process focuses on a specific goal, then successful students can have a greater chance of being even more successful. And that's a big point. All the examples did focus on one goal, and as in West Orange, they wanted to achieve achieve make achievement gains in math, and it was elementary, and that's why I took a lot of connection to that one. Going back to the question of equity, I believe that equity means providing my low-level students the adequate practice and support so they can be as successful as my high-level students. I take example, I have a young lady who's been struggling in math. She's been struggling very hard. But I give her more one-on-one time and small group interaction so I can help bring her up to where the other students are, so she's even more has a greater chance at being successful. I think that was a good point in saying. Another point that they said in there was they were wanting to build on conceptual knowledge with the mathematics, and I take that example, and being that my school itself, we're getting iPads for all of our students, and why does that help us? Um, it gives us a chance to have the same means that the other schools have as far as iPads when they can play games. And I'm a big believer in the the math games are interactive, and it reinforces skills that they work on in the classroom. And I think that's very important in helping just bring the achievement gap. When I look at the success of our students, test grades wise, in our schools compared to the other black schools, we're leading the pack. We're leading the standard and averaging about 78% proficiency. But the white schools, they in the white neighborhoods, they average 84% or higher. So that is an example of wanting to close that gap. Want to close that gap. And I'm gonna leave you with the a statement from the West Orange School District, and just talking about contributing positively to the conversation about equity and instruction can support accomplishments for all students. And wanting to focus on the need for some does not prevent good teaching for others. And that's what they data prove. I want to be able to be intensive in my instruction so that all of my students are making achievement gains, and not just my low level students and not just my high level students, but all of them. Thank you and have a good evening.